Marine veteran James Strauss tells his hanging by the fingernail survival story of his first 30 days of the Vietnam War in 1968. Coming up next on Veteran on the Move.
Welcome to Veteran on the Move. If you're a veteran in transition, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone still stuck in that JOB trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. And now, your host, Joe Crane.
The top 7 paths to freedom is my free gift to you for listening to the show, featuring 7 great ways for a veteran to take their first step into the exciting world of entrepreneurship. To receive your free gift, go to veteranonthemove.com, or if you're listening on a mobile device, you can text the word veteran to 38470. During Jim Strauss's first deployment to Vietnam as a brand new Marine Corps second lieutenant, he was seriously wounded, resulting in a long hospitalization. When he was finally told that it was likely he would live, though still in a hospital bed, Jim looked up and asked God for one favor. He asked to not lead a normal, humdrum life. His book, 30 Days Has September, is a detailed accounting of his Vietnam experience. Jim also shares his experiences and advice on the tough road he has faced in the publishing world. All right, James Strauss, welcome to Veteran on the Move. Thanks for being here. We look forward to hearing your story. Before we get to talking about business and entrepreneurship, take us back and tell us what you did in the Marine Corps.
Well, I was an officer in the Marine Corps, serving in the Vietnam era, and I've written a series of books about the experience, mostly because it was so different to me. I thought that it was pretty exclusive what happened to me in becoming a company commander on my first day or night in country. And as a second lieutenant, what that was like to go through, and then to travel back and forth through a living hell called the A Shau Valley, and what that was like. And so I thought, at the time that I wrote the book, initially in 1970, I tossed the manuscript in my closet because my wife and I both decided I did not want to be identified for Vietnam, which was not popular when I got out of the Corps after I'd been shot and got out of the hospital and was discharged. It wasn't an accommodating time for Vietnam veterans. And also the nature of the book is it's pretty violent. In fact, a writer just wrote in a commenter and said, does it have to be all violence and destruction? Can we do more character analysis? And I had to write back and I said, so sorry that although this is by necessity a fictional rendition, the truth is that's the way it was, and I'm writing the way it happened, and therefore the death and destruction that happened every day and night is going to be right in front of you for the remainder of the series. And of course, a lot of people defended that and some didn't, but nevertheless, that was the time it was. That manuscript laid in my closet, a variety of closet floors, all through the years until a friend of mine who became my IT guy and helping me getting published said, we need some new material for your new author website. And so I rummaged around and I pulled out the manuscript and I started rewriting 30 Days Has September, and that's what this has become, and that became the first novel, and I'm mostly through the second of the second 10 days, and this is really what it's all about, and to discover that the guys who really served in combat, of which there are only around 1 of 8 who served in Vietnam, they have identified massively and surprising the hell out of me. I thought I had a pretty lonely experience there with the racial problems and the fragging problems and all of that. And it turns out that wasn't an uncommon experience in the bush at all. And so I've been really shocked and kind of motivated because of that to continue. Long answer for your question there.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing that your book was more or less 100% complete in 1970, and you just sat on it and actually not only figuratively, but literally put it in the closet for, more than 30 years, right?
Right. And, some of the things that have helped is the fact that I wrote home almost every day while I was in country, and my wife kept all those letters. And then I got some of the memorabilia that came along. And so that with the old maps helped me reassemble a lot of what happened. 3 of the men of my old unit have communicated with me, and all 3 expressed shock that I would remember so much detail that they hadn't until they read the book. It's been nice that they approve of the book, because I wasn't quite sure. Perspective is a funny thing, and over years, for those of us who are older now, we certainly know that sometimes what we remember isn't as exactly accurate as what might have happened. And so I have those questions sometimes when I'm laying the passages down about just how accurate my memory and my reconstructions are, especially when you consider the fact that I could not tell the truth, and I have to read between the lines of my letters home to my wife, because I realized what I was going through would devastate her, and I couldn't see any benefit to that. So I did a lot of describing of rivers, flowers, and the wonderful nature of my fellow man, which wasn't necessarily true, but she needed to hear, I thought. But in that all that detail of the stuff around me, it helped me reassemble what the jungle was really like, what the Bong Song River was really like, and took me back enough where I can have the kind of recall that is there in the 1970 manuscript, but is also active in my mind, because those kinds of experiences burn in like phosphorus intensely and don't come out, which is, of course, a lot of what makes up the result we call post-traumatic stress today.
Right. Now, how did you end up becoming a company commander essentially the day you got to Vietnam?
I made a mistake. I had made those kinds of mistakes before with my expressive personality, and I like to call it my rapier-like wit. And when I appeared in country that afternoon and flew in and was taken immediately to the commanding general's office with the other new officers to be prepped by the chief of staff, I came out of a miserable mess of a barracks, a mud barracks, with benjo pits all around it in Da Nang. And I was marched into the HQ of the commanding general, and it was this beautiful, rugged, air-conditioned ice water coolers. And when we got our 20-minute indoctrination to Vietnam, the chief of staff wanted to know if we had any questions. No one except I did. I raised my hand like I was in school, and he called on me, and I said, I just got out of training in Quantico, and so I'm new. I don't really understand this, but what we learned was to take care of our men first. Why are we living in shit in the mud out there while you guys are sitting in here, our commanders, in air-conditioned comfort?
And how did that go over?
Well, the general brought his feet down from on top of his desk and stopped blowing smoke rings, let's put it that way. He looked at the chief of staff. The chief of staff looked at us and said, everyone else is dismissed. Lieutenant Strauss, you can remain where you are. And so they all filed out, and I realized I might have made a minor mistake in communication. And the chief of staff said, you're being reassigned right now. They'll get their assignments tomorrow. And that was all he said. You're dismissed. So I went out and went back to the barracks, if that's what you can call it, where I was immediately encountered and got my stuff together. And I was taken to a chopper that actually flew at night, which was uncommon in Vietnam. They flew me right to a Marine company where I was landed on the ground under fire and running around in the mud trying to find myself. And ended up with the gunnery sergeant grabbing me and me saying, I was the new forward observer since I'd gone to Fort Sill. And he said, "No, you're not. You're the company commander." And I said, "I can't be a company commander. I'm only a forward observer." And he said, "You're the only officer. You're the company commander." I said, "Where are the other officers?" He said, "They're all dead." And that is how it began. I was the only officer. And so I was company commander automatically in the Marine Corps. I called the command at battalion to say that I couldn't be the company commander, and the battalion commander let me know that I was definitely the company commander, and that was it. So that's how things began.
Wow, that's incredible. So,
Yeah.
So Jim, you actually ended up not spending that much time in the Marine Corps. You were injured and then got out. I guess it was 1970.
Yeah, I spent 3 years in the Corps. Almost my whole, the expected tour for an officer was 3 years at the time. I think I came out 6 days shy when I got my medical determination, discharged, by the way, too disabled to be a Marine officer, but with 0% disability, so I wouldn't get any money. Not necessarily a nice favor, but back in those days, wounded Marines weren't treated like they are today. And so it was tougher times that the boards met and did not have a lot of sympathy if you'd gotten yourself shot. I mean, it's not unlike President Trump commenting on John McCain being captured and a prisoner of war for 5 years. He converted that into almost a shameful thing. And back then, that wasn't uncommon for active duty Marines who had not been in combat to think and then act on. So that I served, but in Vietnam, I was only there before I got shot 30 days. And that's hence the name of the book, 30 Days Has September. And you wonder how that can be 3 books of information. Well, I encourage you to start with the first chapter when that steel door slams open in Da Nang, and that DI kind of guy was standing there, and all he said was, "Welcome to the Nam, gentlemen." And then life changed, and has, of course, never gone back.
Wow, that's incredible. So, today we talk a lot about transition, and even today with, minimal combat experience for some folks, transitioning back to the civilian society is still not necessarily easy. And I can only imagine what it was like back in 1970, especially when you weren't welcomed back into society very much. But even today, when theoretically veterans are welcomed back into society with open arms, so many of us still struggle with everything, and that transition back to what we would refer to as normalcy in the civilian sector. What did you end up doing initially once you were discharged and started looking around at what you're going to do in the civilian world?
Well, it was a very difficult time. I had a wife and a very small daughter, and I was being evicted from my apartment. I couldn't walk right. One of the bullets had taken out my left hip. I was losing my car, was being repossessed, and I went to the VA for help, but I quickly realized that there were a bunch of VA counselors there making really great money, and their counseling had a lot to do with how I was to accommodate being poor and broken down and unavailable to be hired, and how I could accept that. All I really wanted was a decent job with decent pay and decent respect, but that wasn't going to be what was offered. But then again, you have to consider real combat veterans and what post-traumatic stress really is. It's not a bunch of bad memories. It's not a bunch of awful experiences that you try to expunge by forgetting them or by going to group encounter and repeating them so you can minimize them. Post-traumatic stress is where, when that door slammed open in the mud, I stepped from the phenomenal world, this fake world, into reality. And then I lived it for the next 30 days. And then that door closed, and I was back in the phenomenal world after experiencing reality. I was 23 years old in Camp Pendleton, California, looking around at my fellow man. I had already lost hundreds of men, many of them close to me personally, in combat experiences. And I was around people who'd never lost one and would not for many years, and not under traumatic circumstances. How do I associate myself back in with that? How do I get a real job? How do I come back? How can you come back from that? I was so changed by my experience that in that short period of time, when I flew into Travis Air Force Base on a gurney, there were a dozen of those gurneys unloaded off the C-141 Starlifter, and our wives came down the hall. My wife walked by, looked at me, and went on. She didn't recognize me. And when the corpsman brought her back and said, "This is indeed him," she started questioning me to make sure that I was really me. She still didn't believe I was me. Everything had changed. My facial presentation, my voice, everything about me had changed. And then, you're not, as the gunny told me once about the Ashau Valley, the Valley of No Return. I said, "Gunny, if the Ashau, which we were about to enter, is the Valley of No Return, you've been to the Ashau before and you came back." And he said, this was after my first week in the Nam. He said, "No, I didn't. This isn't me. This is somebody else. Certainly not the guy who went in there." And he said, "Look back a week. Can you now think that you're the same person you were only a week ago? And you've only seen Ganoi Island. You haven't been to the Ashau." He had a point. And so that point is illustrated by my return and then trying to get a job and financially make it back here with people who had no comprehension whatsoever of what reality was. And I have to admit, don't today. Most of America wants change. And I want to shout at them, no, you don't. You want to keep this thing going, the United States of America, like it has been going and developing. You just haven't gone out there to see what's out there. When you come back from out there, this is a pretty wonderful place.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you end up getting into the civilian world, working in the civilian sector eventually?
I worked as an underwriter for Allstate Insurance Company. There was a program that the Marine Corps had that some companies would hire disabled officers, and the Marine Corps would pay them for their last 3 months or so in the military. And that way the company got you for free. So I went to work for Allstate as an underwriter. And then I got picked up by just near the end of my military tour. I got picked up to go work for the Nixon estate in San Clemente, California. They called it the Winter White House or Summer White House. Mm-hmm. The Western White House, at Cotton Estate in San Clemente, where I live. So then I went to work there in security, running the beach patrol, working for a guy named H.R. Haldeman, who was one of the advisors to the president, who looked like a Marine and acted like a Marine, but was pissed off with guys who really were Marines. One of those. And so I then worked for them and ended up working in the San Clemente Police Department when my hip healed and I could really get around and stuff. So I was there for Nixon's departure and working in that area for quite some time. So that's how I made it. And then I got into the insurance business when I found out I could do insurance part-time. And I started selling so much insurance that I was able to leave police and security work and do that.
Hey, Jim, I'm going to pause there momentarily. We got to take a quick break for a sponsorship break. We'll be right back. Have you joined the Veteran on the Move Facebook group? I personally invite every guest that I have on the podcast to join the group. So the Veteran on the Move Facebook group is a great way to connect with previous podcast guests. Our Facebook group will keep you in touch with other veterans that are transitioning to entrepreneurship, and you will also get great updates and free guides on the people, programs, and resources that will help you in your transition to entrepreneurship. All right, we're back with Marine veteran Jim Strauss talking about publishing. And Jim, your book, 30 Days Has September, is your first one, and you're actively involved in publishing some other books and publishing chapter at a time. So can you touch a little bit on what it's like to get into publishing? It's not easy. And there's a lot of veterans out there that have some stories and they say, hey, I want to write a book about it. But what else is involved when it comes to actually publishing a book?
Well, the mythology is difficult to deal with because you believe that all you have to do is find an agent. The agent will represent you to get a publisher, and then if your work is any good, you'll get published. Well, that isn't how it works. Agents don't find you a publisher. They're there to negotiate your contract if you get a publisher. If you go to a publisher, they'll tell you you need an agent to go to them, so you can't get there without being there. And that's exactly the way it's supposed to be because they basically don't want you. They've already got the people that they want. And most of the publishers will say they don't take unsolicited manuscripts. Well, that means no new people get in unless they have special avenues to get in. So with Amazon, however, you can go there and get your work published. Now, that means you're probably never going to build, you're not going to have Harry Potter. You're not going to build that kind of following. It just does not happen because there's no way to reach that many people to get them to read your work, which is what it's all about. Today in the internet, we call that branding, how you get people to come to your site, and people do a variety of things to get people to come to their site. A lot of it, basically crooked, where you're baiting and switching. Whether you get involved with that or not, first of all, you have to have product. Well, it's very difficult to have a refined product when you're a lone writer out there because trying to edit your own work is extremely difficult. That's not the way our brains work. Our brains write down a mistake, and then we see the mistake, and we don't see it as a mistake. We see it as the way we think it ought to be, when actually it shouldn't be, not to a reader who's reading from the outside. So you need outside editing help, and that means unless you have friends who are editors, and everyone thinks they're an editor and they're not, there are professional editors who really know how to do that work, and you have to find them and find the finances to be able to put the book out. To put a book on Amazon, in reality, to have a refined product, is probably a $10,000 operation when you're all said and done. You're going to have to pay WordPress, you're going to have to pay an IT guy, you're going to have to pay people to coordinate and get that book out. You've got to select the book cover. You have to make sure you do that financially reasonably, which means you have to have probably public art that you can use. And there's some good stuff out there that is in the public realm, but you have to learn the difference between what's in the public realm and what's not. You can't just pull stuff off the internet. You can do that for Facebook, but they're going to sue you if you do it and make money from selling their imagery, and you can understand why. So you've got those ins and outs of all these little seemingly minor details before you ever get your product up there. And then once you have your product out, how do you get people to find it? Which is the problem of the internet today. How do people find you from everybody else? Because there are billions of people clamoring for attention. So you have to find a way to get their attention. And Facebook is one of those ways. But again, you're going to end up spending money. Even though I've had 5,000 friends for quite some time, the truth is Facebook doesn't expose your work as you write on your page to 5,000 people every day. They probably expose it to 100 or maybe 150 that really appear on their pages because they have algorithms, because they don't intend for you to be that popular. Facebook intends to be that popular themselves. They want to talk to you. They don't want to necessarily hear from you. So you have to do what's called boosting, which means that you have to pay to have other pages put your work up in front of those people. And it can be quite expensive. I mean, you can reach 20,000 people, but it's going to cost you $100. What's the value in having 20,000 people see maybe the front page of your book in a very small write-up? Well, that's probably one sale, maybe two. You just spent $100 and you got two sales. You're making $6 a book if you're lucky on the hardcover. So you made $12. You spent $100. what am I doing anyway? And who can call this a business? You have to think in the long range. You're going to be investing in your business and you're going to be putting money in. So it does become worth it over time. And it will work out over time if you can stay at it. And that, of course, depends on the fact that you have something to offer that is different and people might see a value. My market on 30 Days Has September, which is not my only book, but it's the one I've put my latest intensity and concentration in. My following is primarily Marine combat veterans and Army combat veterans, all kinds of combat veterans, active duty ones in Afghanistan and everything else. And those are thousands, by the way. I get on my website, every time I put up a chapter, I'm responding to 200 or 300 comments, which I respond to them all, which is time consuming and hard. Why? Because they're poignant, but also they tend to build a following and they tend to take your work and give it to other people. I just got an email back yesterday from one of the biggest prisons in Texas. Someone got my book and I'm very popular on death row in this big prison in Texas. Now, that may not seem much. Death row inmates don't buy a lot of product. But nevertheless, the word goes out and, it goes from here to there. And then you have to wait for a bit of serendipity to help you along. You've done the work. You have the product. You've invested in the product. And then luck has to play a role. Are you going to be found? It isn't all just hard work, and then your hard work will be rewarded. Yeah, and then the big thing is probably of everything, endurance. What's your capability of enduring? Financially, at home, when you take money to put into this project, you're taking it from other places, and your wife and family may not necessarily share your view. Well, what are you getting out of it? How much money have you made? Well, I made $1,700. How much did you spend? $10,340. Well, that doesn't work very well with the wife. Not when she can do simple mathematics and say, that is an entire spread of furniture for our whole house. That is the patio on the back. That is, all the other things that $10,000 could have paid for. And you're faced with that reality as you go along and proceed with this. And yet, many times you have to be driven just by the commentary you get back when people like your work, and hopefully they will. And then that alone can help you endure through that tough part to where you're finally making enough money to justify your existence and what you believed was a career as a writer. And probably not knowing that maybe 0.5% of all writers ever make it over the crossover into making real profit.
That's definitely the odds are against you.
Yeah, the arts are tough. They really are. And, even regular business is tough. But the arts as a business are extremely tough, and you almost have to have it as a hobby because of the time involved in doing it, especially now that, once your mythology is penetrated that you're going to write a great book, send it off to New York, and one of the publishing houses is going to publish you. The answer to that is no, it's not going to happen. And you need not beat your head against that wall. It might have happened earlier on in our country's development and development of the literary industry, but it does not happen anymore. And you have you just go to the shopping center and look at the bookstore and, see who's on the end of the gondolas and all that, and how much money has to be paid to support them being there. And then how many of those people are actually writing anymore. And most of the big authors don't have time to write. They only have time to be big authors. And so they have other people writing their work, but we won't go into that right now.
Well, hey, Jim, unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of our time here. What is your website if we want to come check you out and check your books and take a look at everything and maybe even be one of those guys commenting?
It's jamesstrauss.com. So I was able to buy my own name, which is another project you may have. Having your own name, jamesstrauss.com, is a big deal. That's James Strauss with 2 S's.com. Well, it took me 7 years. Somebody else had that, and I had to buy it from him. You may not be able to get it, and you need that kind, you need to rise on Google in order to have people check you out. And then remember, when people are checking you out, they're going to check you all out, which means that, you may have more information on there than you want them to know. Do you really want to be famous? If you want to be famous, well, get used to the idea that you don't do anything alone anymore. The world does it with you. This is a different world.
Right. Well, hey, James, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks for your compelling story, sharing that with us, your experiences in Vietnam. And you gave us a huge reality pill on the ins and outs of the real publishing world. So I appreciate that. And I'm definitely going to go take a look at jamesstrauss.com, check out some of your books. And, for those of you listening to the show, check out Jim's books and his website there. He's publishing stuff all the time on the website. And you do have a couple books coming out here in the near future also, correct?
Yeah. Well, the second and third one. And, I was also in the CIA for a period of time. So I wrote about, some of those experiences, and some of those have become books as well. So Down in the Valley and the Bering Sea, those were some of my screwed up missions with the CIA, which I don't know. I don't think I ever had a mission, Marine Corps or CIA, that wasn't screwed up in some way. But maybe that's just real life.
Best laid plans of mice and men, huh? Okay. Well, thanks, Jim. It's been great talking with you, and definitely check out your website. Thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you, Joe. Take care.
As you can tell from listening to the Veteran on the Move podcast, interviews are a great way to tell your story and spread the word about your business. If you would like to get booked as a podcast guest, I recommend Interview Valet. You can check out Interview Valet at veteranonthemove.com/valet. Be sure to check out Thrive15.com, the world's premier online education platform that helps entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and intrapreneurs learn how to start or grow a successful business. Start your free 30-day membership by going to Thrive15.com and use the promo code VETERAN. Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.